so I don't get blamed for anything else now.
Yeah, we just didn't know. We didn't know that we didn't have sound. I noticed the light wasn't on, but I
Yep.
didn't.
All right. Well, I mean, I did get a phone call last time during the meeting, or a text from LaRue Holly, and said, the audio is off. And I said, I called her in the parking lot, and I said, I am so sorry I missed your call. I said, but my phone gets turned on silent and goes upside down, so I don't look at it.
Right, I agree. Yeah.
And yeah, so
Well, that's all right.
all right. We'll go ahead and call the October 14th Town of Andrew Planning Board to session. We will start. I will lead the group in the pledge and the invocation, if everybody will rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Dear Lord, we humbly come to you today to do the town's business, to look at our community, to help it grow for all people, the new people, the people who are just moving in, the people who've been here all their life. We want to create a harmonious town where we can grow and expand as neighbors. Please guide us with your wisdom, and we will do our best. In your name we pray, amen. All right, so first we have the consideration of the agenda. Anything we need to add or delete from the agenda as written? No addition. So at this point, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as written.
So motion's been made to approve as written. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion will carry unanimously. The next, we have the approval of the September 9th Planning Board meeting minutes. As they were written, they are on page 2 and page 3 of the packet. Anybody see any modifications they would like to request as far as that agenda or that Planning Board meeting? Not seeing any motions to make a modification, the chair will entertain a motion to approve minutes as written.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. The motion will carry 4-0. I think we do need to note that we are missing 2 board members, but we do have a quorum, so we will be fine with 4 votes. New business will be the Andrew 2045. That's a scary thought. 2045 Planning and Purpose Comprehensive Plan. If the staff would like to introduce us to the plan and then introduce us to the gentleman who worked tirelessly to get this thing put together, the 2 of y'all.
That's right. Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Andrew 2045. That does sound really far out there. It's 20 years. And we can all remember where we were 20 years ago. And now we're thinking 20 years in the future. And, hopefully we'll all be here and we'll be able to see, hopefully, some of the efforts that we put forth into the comprehensive plan 20 years from now. It's our best guess, our best shot over a year's time. So this process started in about this time last year with the selection of Withers and Ravenel to do our new comprehensive plan, and then really took off in earnest in the beginning of the new year with community meetings, stakeholder meetings, which included folks from the county, DOT, other adjacent municipalities. Myself and Greg and others would be involved in those meetings. It also took effort of our steering committee members, which our chair was part of the steering committee. Our steering committee met 4 or 5 times in person, and we had numerous contacts throughout the process with the steering committee. There were updates to the town board throughout the process, and there were community events that we were that we were present at to get feedback. So Greg is going to go over, Greg Feldman with Withers and Ravenel is going to go over our plan. This is our new comprehensive plan, which we all will be using throughout new development that comes to us and through us. You know, the big important is the future land use map. We reference that almost on a monthly basis when we have meetings or rezoning request or development request. And I will say that the whole effort started out with what is Andrew today and where are we going to be late in the future. And so a vision statement was developed, and I'll just sort of read this for the minutes and for the folks who aren't here. Andrew is a family-friendly small town that values its strong sense of community. The town will support thoughtful development that enhances quality of life for its varied population while preserving its local charm. Andrew will prioritize improving transportation routes and in supporting economic growth through new commercial and mixed-use development, with an emphasis on opportunities related to NC 55 bypass. Andrew will continue expanding and supporting parks, recreation, and walkability. This vision statement, again, was a result of all the efforts, surveys, community outreach, and this sort of coalesces what that effort was into a vision statement that will carry us forward into the next 20 years or so. All right, I'll turn it over to Greg, and he'll go through his PowerPoint, and anytime throughout the process, if you have questions, let us know. Either myself or Greg will be able to answer those. But I'll turn it over to Greg. Thank you.
Well said, Jeff, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For those of you who have not had the chance yet to formally meet, my name is Greg Feldman. I'm a project manager and long-range planner, both by trade and education. So what that really means is I help communities, local governments across the state through the comprehensive plan process. You know, we have several, just as Andrew, several communities in and around the Triangle, east of 95, west in the Asheville area in the mountain region, growing rapidly. And it's common for a municipality or county that is quickly growing to update its long-range plans. In this case, it's comprehensive plan. So just for a little bit of context, probably a plan you all have become fairly familiar with, which is the 2017 version of the comprehensive land use plan for the town. Over the last year, I have been fortunate enough to work alongside Jeff, talented individuals and contributors to this process from the community in updating this document so that we make sure we capture and put a vision forward, as Jeff just read, to the year 2045, so looking through a 20-year lens for the community of Andrew. So I'm very excited to be standing before you all this evening and walking you through a little bit in detail about what's taken place over the last year and really share a little bit about how we got to where we are with this final draft of the plan before you all this evening. So without further ado, I've prepared just a brief agenda. This is a very loose 4-bullet guide to our conversation this evening. My hope is that it becomes conversational and I'm able to field and answer any questions that you all may have of me and the project team. But I'm going to start with the project overview. I've been fortunate to have some of you plugged in throughout the way and perhaps some of you plugged in other ways. Maybe you've read the document online or you've been engaged through the community survey that Jeff mentioned or other opportunities we had. But nonetheless, I want to get everyone up to speed this evening and talk about what's taken place over the last 12 months. I'll share a project schedule and we'll talk through that. We'll also talk about what really set the guiding rails for this document. In other words, what helped us create some of the plan objectives and action items that you all will find at the end of this document, including the future land use map, which will really help kind of wrap up our conversation this evening. We'll talk about kind of what this board's role is with the new comprehensive plan, how it can be used as a tool, as a guiding document for future land use decisions. So that's just a brief overview, and on the right-hand side, that cover should probably look fairly familiar, but it is the cover of this document. Andrew 2045, Planning with Purpose. Okay, so just here briefly to talk through kind of where we looking back to exactly 12 months ago, when we started off with our task one. Our task one of 3 is how I like to refer to it, which really began with our background data collecting and community profile gathering. That all took place under our project initiation and analysis task. So what does that really mean? Well, we did a lot of mapping using the available data from the county's GIS department. We also took a look at different demographic information, really got a feel for existing conditions within the community of Anger. Because before any team can start to make reasonable recommendations for the future, it's very important that we understand what exists on the ground today and kind of how we got to where we are today. That helped us really set the stage for beginning our thought process on looking through that 20-year lens that I mentioned. We also had several engagement events that all kind of took place on this November 19th day. You'll see that kind of long blob there with the November 19th date. That was our community tour and kickoff. I was fortunate enough to join Jeff and actually go on a full driving tour to see all the new development popping up, kind of get a feel for what some of that development looks like. As Jeff mentioned, we also got to talk with some of the development community and general stakeholders, including both Harnett County and the town of Lillington, to kind of hear their thoughts on how they're growing as well, so we can find ways to maybe coordinate and grow without duplicating efforts together. And on that day, including the community tour and kickoff, we also had our initial project steering committee meeting that we were fortunate enough to have a few members from this board as part of that committee to share some insight and have that bit of perspective from a board who hears land use matters on a regular basis. And of course, stakeholder interviews, as I mentioned, and then kind of wrapping up the evening with, well, let me take us a week ahead, but actually going before the Board of Commissioners, who this plan will also be presented to in its final draft form for kind of an update, really just a kickoff presentation to share a little bit about what all goes into this process. So that kind of wrapped up that first 4 or 5 month data collecting and background information and an understanding of existing conditions portion of this process. And then we got boots on the ground and engaged with the community in a very heavy way through our visioning and plan development process. So this task is really titled Visioning and Plan Development, but what it really should say is assembling the plan based on what we hear from the community, blended with the data and information that we've gathered. So that kind of visioning and plan development portion of this process, as Jeff mentioned, did start with a community survey. I'll share a few more metrics on that in just a bit. But it also allowed us to help draft the community vision statement and overarching goals of this document, which we'll also talk about in detail more. You'll see a few milestones there with our engagement on our steering committee. We met as a group 5 different times, and I'll talk about that again in a little bit of detail, as well as our public meetings. But kind of at the tail end of that visioning and plan development stop, that's when we assembled the future land use map, arguably a portion of this document that you all, dare I say, may refer to the most out of any other page within this comprehensive plan. It'll probably be that portion of this document, which is the future land use map. Also something I've dedicated 2 slides to this evening to talk about. Not any less important, but also these draft plan recommendations were formed at this point in the process. These are our plan action items that will also talk to a little bit of the structuring, and really what we learned was kind of maybe not a downfall, that may be a harsh way to put it, but what we learned might have been kind of a pain point within, from a usability standpoint, in the 2017 document. What we hopefully streamlined, or we hope and really confidently say we think we've streamlined in this document before you this evening. So that wraps up that kind of second stop, and here we are. We had about a month, maybe a little less than a month long draft review period for the community. So the document that you all have before you this evening, we put our pens down and posted it online for the community to review at their availability. Open the door for comments during that period, and also Jeff and I and the planning staff were able to workshop some items and refine some portions of the document as well during that, or following that draft review period, rather, excuse me. And so that brings us to today. I'll wrap up tonight's presentation with next steps and talk about a little bit more as to what to expect from here. Apologize for being long-winded on that, but I did mention I was going to talk about community survey results. This took place in the mid-January, so after the holiday season, really last year, mid-January to late February timeframe. This survey was launched. Any successful survey, as we all know, as anyone who's taken one, it shouldn't take more than 5 minutes to complete, or I'm guilty of probably putting the survey down. And so that's something we kept in mind. We wanted to make sure we strategically crafted these questions, that we also got the assistance of our steering committee and kind of blessing to move those questions forward. But they were geared around items such as, as new development moves forward, what would you like to see it come in the shape of? Right? And what do you love most about Andrew? What do you dislike, maybe? Or what are you most fearful for moving into the 20-year future? So questions of that nature were asked in this survey. Again, it only took 5 minutes to complete. Survey was open for a 2-month period. We had over 150 survey respondents, 167 according to the metrics here. Probably a more impressive number, and a number I like to hone in on, is the overall write-in responses, because that signals someone who actually took the time to type up a customized response to one of the questions, so a write-in response. In other words, someone who really cared enough to share some input with us, right? Not just go through and click multiple choice answer selections. So 506 write-in responses, I think that's quite an accomplishment. And then our last question was kind of, if you want to stay in the loop, please leave your email. And we actually had folks who were certainly interested in staying in touch with the process. So that also showed a good engagement level. This graph on the right, who responded, I really like this, this chart because it kind of tells a story, I think. We had nearly half of our 167 survey respondents, so call it 80 survey respondents, were folks that have lived in the town for less than 5 years. So I think, less than 5 years, we're talking about they've moved here after the last comprehensive plan process took place in 2017. So we're getting very much new Anger residents involved within this process. But we're also, if you look, we're really getting 35% folks who have been here for between 10 and 20 and 20 plus years. So I think that's a very good kind of blend of responses according to these survey metrics. So that said, I think to summarize and get to my point, we heard a lot of varying views from different folks with respect to levels and terms of tenure in the town. So what did we hear from that survey? What did we glean from that survey? You may have already seen this word cloud within the document, but you can kind of visualize what folks care about most according to what they chose to write in and respond to within the survey. And that really is at the very top of the list, combined with parks and recreation, environmental preservation. We speculated a little bit as to why that may be. We took a few guesses, but we'll get to that later in the presentation. But environmental preservation at the very top of that list according to survey respondents. Similar theme in a bit of a different form, because we're starting to talk about the built environment a little bit here, but parks and recreation was at the top of a lot of folks' minds, whether that be paired with the kind of Newtown Park or Jack Marley. I think a combination of both. Folks were excited about parks and recreation and certainly want to see more investment into that. Downtown enhancements, I think you can see it big and bold on this word cloud. Downtown was very important to not only folks that participated in this survey, but also just about at every pop-up event or community open house we held, continuing momentum and beautification, overall aesthetics, and just diversifying businesses and offerings downtown so you can get that full live, work, play concept in Anger was at, I'd say, at the top of a lot of folks' minds that we spoke with. Blend that with walkability to and from places of interest. Congestion, that's a frequent flyer, of course, but certainly taking into consideration some of the long-term transportation plans, and I'll share a little bit about how a big piece of infrastructure investment, being the bypass, played a role in this plan as well. But also public safety and, again, enhanced transportation infrastructure, aka the bypass. So because I was long-winded on survey themes, I'm going to get through these rather quickly. Just meant to show you a few extra layers of engagement that took place throughout the process. So dating us back now to November of last year, 11 months ago, we met in this room for our kickoff event that I spoke about when we talked through the schedule. April 2025, I have to say that's an awesome event. The Spring Concert Series, very, very well attended event. We had a great time. We got to leverage some of the foot traffic. Something we like to do as part of an engagement process is, hey, let's meet people where they are, right, already, where they may be comfortable / not expecting to share their input, but happy to do so because it's convenient, right? So that was there. Just a pop-up event. You'll see the kind of informational boards we had there at the Spring Concert event back in April. And then just a couple of months ago now, time has been flying since then, but actually July 31st, so the very end of July, we had our final community open house in here where we actually unveiled the full draft plan as you have before you this evening. We had a few tweaks were certainly made in that document because what we did ask for attendees at that event, and Jeff, you may have to help me out how many folks we think we had there that evening. 30, yeah, we had a good showing. I think it was a great showing. 6:30 was.
And then most of those folks who made a point, made an effort to be here right at that time. We had a handful of folks who came later on, but it was sort of, I noted it, that it was full, and people were waiting for us to set up too. So the word was out, and folks.
Absolutely.
And the people actually came and spoke and talked and engaged and pulled off in little side groups to talk about it. They didn't walk in and walk out in 10 minutes.
No.
They were here for 45 minutes to an hour. So
It was a good representation of folks that come to most events, most town board meetings, and new people too, who never come to meetings. So it was nice to have a balance of folks who haven't engaged at town board meetings or plan board meetings, just to come out and hear how the town's vision is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think to that point, a well-attended event, everyone was really there when the doors opened up. I had two other members of my project team with me, of the Withers Ravenel team with me. I think individually, I spoke to at least a dozen different folks, had very meaningful conversation on the plan's action items. So that's what we really asked input for at that event. We had several displays with every single action item in this plan and actually had attendees place a preference dot next to kind of where they prioritized that certain action item so we could get a kind of an understanding of, you know, what the priority list looks like, right? You can't tackle every single action item or recommendation within this plan within years 1 through 5, right? They need to be staggered so that they actually are achievable and you don't set kind of an impossible stage within the framework that is this implementation component of the comprehensive plan. But certainly a great event. And here's where I give a special shout out to our project steering committee. As I mentioned, we met, for the most part, all 5 meetings within this room, right here, right around this table. We talked about everything in this process from, hey, let's craft the community survey together. Let's take a look at some of the demographic data and GIS mapping that we performed throughout this process. Let's talk about these things and what do we think they really mean as it relates to a comprehensive land use plan. So a lot of brainstorming went into these 5 different steering committee sessions. I think these individuals, which fortunately we have you, Chairman Blake, and also Mr. Julian, who I don't think can be here with us this evening, absolutely key contributors to this process. We can't thank everyone on this list enough for their time and input. As I mentioned, we not only kind of discussed some of that background data and information we collected, but also we debriefed our community open houses. What did we hear from the community? Here's how we are planning to roll with this information, that we proceed with this information that we heard from the community. You all as being kind of ambassadors and having a pulse on the everyday Anger, do we think that's the right direction? And so certainly a good sounding board as our project champions for the steering committee. Jeff mentioned this vision statement, so I won't read it again verbatim, but every successful long-range plan, it's my belief, and I would argue that everyone who's been a part of a long-range plan would agree, every successful long-range plan has a guiding vision. Sometimes it comes in the form of something 3 pages long. Sometimes it comes with something in the form of something half of this size. But what this vision statement really does, in just really a paragraph, but actually only 2 sentences, 3 sentences, so just about there, what this sentence does, what this vision statement, does, is set the kind of, as I mentioned earlier and referred to them as guide rails for how the document was going to be constructed in terms of the plan goals, recommendations, aka action items in our case, and ultimately the future land use map. So within this single vision statement, we touched on about every concept that was a priority based on the engagement we had with the community and leadership of the town as well. And so, as I mentioned, what that vision statement allowed us to do is kind of basket everything, similar to how the 2017 plan went about it, although the 2017 plan, as I mentioned, is going to talk about a few of the differences between the two documents. One is certainly the goal count, so we were at about 10 goals in the 2017 plan. Kind of recommendations scattered throughout, I think, is the best way to place it. So not really a structure, an organized structure for how the document was intended to be used and implemented with respect to future decisions made by the town and, of course, future recommendations made by this board. So what we did was kind of consolidate, because there were some differences in priorities on where the community was at that point in time and where they are today with respect to, again, their priority list, to put it plainly. But what that did was allow us to basket everything into 5 different goals. And so in the top left corner, natural spaces and recreation. What we're really talking about is preserving Anger's natural amenities, aka undeveloped land, as well as recreational facilities. So kind of thinking about, again, future parks, trails, greenway network, and just passive space in general as well. Improving mobility was a big one. I think I mentioned one of our big survey themes was improving walkability. So we're talking about enhancing Anger's transportation network using the words multimodal. So we're talking about transportation outside of just that of an automobile, right? So we're talking about, hey, and funny enough, we had 2 planning board members this evening get to this meeting by bike and skateboard. So again, for I think improving opportunities and ways so that method of transportation, outside of just traveling by vehicle, is attractive, right, and accessible and easy to do. So that's a big portion of this, improving mobility. Manage growth. So it's no secret to anyone on this board or anyone in this room that Anger is experiencing significant growth. So when I say manage, I think we really mean, let's think about intentionally, as we get future development in, what do we want it to come in the form of? What do we want it to look like? We know growth to some degree is going to happen. It happens in every thriving community, really any community that is growing at any pace. But let's be intentional about what it looks like when it comes in. Kind of goes hand in hand with this preserve character goal. So I think folks are understanding of the growth who participated in this process, but also don't want to lose what is Anger, right? What is small town charm? What is sense of community? So how can we kind of accomplish those 2 things, aka the growth basket, understanding it's going to come and being intentional about what it looks like, and also preserving what we kind of came to Anger for and to have. And then lastly, invest in services. This one is a little more technical, maybe, dare I say, than the other 4. But when you have a lot of growth, as unprecedented as it may have been over the last half a decade or so, you need to be intentional about keeping your services, aka your infrastructure, that's not limited to water, sewer, roads, up to date, right? So that you're not just kind of playing a retroactive game or playing catch up, so to speak. You're kind of planning ahead. And that really is what this invest in services goal is intended to cover or speak to. So a lot of snips on this page, screenshots from the plan. But this is all within the implementation component of this document. That is where you're going to find the action items for this comprehensive plan. So kind of the to-do list, the concrete, hey, comprehensive plan's adopted. Where do we start? Where do we go next? So this is intended to really serve as that roadmap. And so kind of a key difference on where we are today versus the 2017 plan with respect to structuring. So within this document, I mentioned we have our vision statement, and then underneath of that vision statement, we had 5 goals that were guided by it that I just mentioned on our last slide. Underneath those goals, which a goal again is that intended kind of overarching long-term outcome for Andrew, we have more specific, we're getting a little more specific here with objectives. So all associated with that goal, but we have different objectives. And underneath those, we have those concrete, which are on our right. You'll see action item 5.31, 5.32, and then at the top there is our overall 5.3 objective. Our action items are concrete. Okay, what do we do? These are our tasks or actions to accomplish each objective. Ultimately, you continue to check the boxes of these action items. You knock out an objective. Ultimately, I'm going to say goal a lot, but the goal is to achieve the plan goals, right? Also something of note here within this section, we have different time frames associated with each action item. Those span from short term, and that kind of signals where we heard priority input from the community, and also my team as well as the town having input kind of on, well, hey, let's try to kind of stagger a lot of these maybe more expensive or maybe require a little more resources in general by the community. I think we need to stagger these based on priority. We can't have hundreds of millions of dollars in action items or just something that requires quite a deal of resources all aimed at being accomplished within 1 to 3 years. That's not feasible, right? That's poor planning. So we have, again, to continue, short term, medium term, 3 to 5 years, long term, 5+ items, and then ongoing. So we have a few of these action items that are maybe include words such as monitor, right? Those are annually, those are just ongoing items in nature. Also around a few, point out here, around a few of our action items, we did include case studies. So on this example here, action item 5.34, we're talking about strategically enhancing downtown public services, starting with the town hall and police department. That was brought up several times throughout this process. And as I mentioned, in general, aesthetics and overall feel and look of downtown was mentioned quite a bit. So we have an action item here actually from the town of Mebane, city of Mebane, where kind of a way of us at least giving some direction as opposed to, hey, let's go figure it out what this one sentence really means. Just a way to help conquer the blank page is how I'd like to put it. All right. And here's where I'm going to try to pause as needed and answer any questions from you all, because I did kind of set myself up for this by saying it's arguably the most important, or maybe not most important is not the best way to put it, but maybe a portion of this plan that you all as a board will use more frequently than others, although it's my hope you use the whole document at all times. But that is our different flavors of land use. So where we kind of landed on 7 different flavors of land use, not to be confused with Chapter 7, our future land use map, we have kind of broken down categories that really check all the boxes, or at least maybe cover all the bases with respect to potential development and what uses may come to the town. So creating a future land use map is a very delicate and intense process at the same time. And what I mean by that is you are using several different data points to help you create it. You're always keeping community input in mind. You're also blending it with infrastructure, aka the bypass played a major role in the shaping of this future land use map with respect to which kind of character area here or designation worked the best around that piece of infrastructure. You're also taking into account some of the more environmentally constrained areas, aka the floodplain, kind of undevelopable lands. You're also taking a look at growth trends. Hey, where are we seeing a lot of residential growth move to? Where are we not really seeing it, but it's kind of on the bubble, it's on the brink. Of course, you have downtown to take into consideration, as well as the surrounding residences to downtown, aka our downtown residential designation. But we're also using other data points, like I mentioned, like current zoning plays a factor, right? Let's kind of take a look at what the zoning map calls for in these areas. You know, obviously there is some intent as to why some of these areas are zoned the way they currently are. So we want to make sure we kind of pay our respect to that map and at least take it into consideration as well. Also looking back to where we were in 2017, and actually mention it here, the future land use map from the current plan was updated in 2021. Just the map portion of the current comprehensive plan was updated in 2021, large in part due to the bypass. So without going down the rabbit hole of all the different maps and voices and data that played a part in creating the future land use map, it led us to these 7 different future land use designations or character areas, as we refer to them in this document as. So you will be, you as a planning board, you all will, and I'm going to share the map now on the screen, you all will, as you do in other cases, have a development proposal that falls within, maybe it's a rezoning, we'll run with that as an example, that falls within one of these different future land use categories. And, you know, your all's kind of role, and of course staff will assist in this, will be to kind of evaluate where is it consistent, where is it inconsistent with our 20-year vision, our vision for the future on this, in this area of town. So that just kind of to set the stage, but as you all know, a future land use map is not a zoning map. So it is not regulatory. No one's property designation from a kind of land use law and regulation standpoint is changed, right? This is just simply a guide, a reference tool. North Carolina General Statutes requires municipalities, and probably should have led with this, to have a, quote, reasonably up-to-date land use plan. And so as part of this process, you all have a very, now freshly, brand new, up-to-date perspective and new future land use map to now take into account when deciding or recommending a development proposal or change in zoning forward to the Board of Commissioners. Okay, and I kind of already started on this slide, but this is going to wrap it up, and I'm going to open the door. Obviously, I spoke a ton, so understand you all may have some questions for me or for Jeff. But what is this board's role? This is included. I'm sorry you all are on the hook now because this is etched within the comprehensive plan, but what is the planning board's role in implementing this document? I think to put it simply, when you all are tasked with making a recommendation on a land use decision, rezoning, new subdivision, whatever the case may be that on the project that comes before you all for consideration, make sure you're referencing not only the future land use map, but also our different action items. I talked about the structuring of this plan's goals, objectives, and action items. Does this rezoning or does this development, right, this is a hypothetical, move the needle forward on any of these different action items? And do we think it does, or how does it? So that's just a kind of your all's role and the hope of this, of how you all will use this document. And again, regularly monitor kind of the progress made. I think that helps with some sort of sense of, you know, hey, we just went through this year-long process. Let's keep momentum moving. Folks are associating, you know, the town with going through this comprehensive land use plan update. Let's keep that momentum moving forward. How are we doing with respect to implementing some of our different action items? So this is a living document. I'm sure you all have heard that term before with respect to a unified development ordinance. That means it can be changed. But as part of the living kind of mindset of this document. We have this living column, which indicates kind of, hey, and there's no time frame set on this, but I think good practice would be, let's take an annual look at where we are with things, if not biannual, on where we are with implementing these action items. Have we completed action item 1 point? Have we made this action item come to life with updating the UDO? We understood that was kind of agreed upon and a priority at the time of the comp plan. Well, hey, maybe we haven't because priorities shifted. You know, that's no longer the direction from the community. This is just kind of intended to have some sort of sense of daily tie to the document and kind of further the point of it being a usable tool. So that's going to really wrap me up, and apologize. I wanted to make sure all of us were kind of up to speed on what took place over the last year, so I really appreciate you bearing with me throughout that long presentation. Tonight, we are seeking a formal recommendation from this board as to the recommendation for approval for the document to proceed now to the Board of Commissioners to be discussed and heard through a public hearing at their November 5th meeting. And so that will be kind of next steps for this document. Should the document be approved, it would then go into effect, and the community would have its new up-to-date voice in the form of this 100-plus page plan, as well as the future land use map. Yeah.
Can we speak to a little bit, because you can see it in our schedule, sewer basin analysis. Can you speak to the sewer basin analysis project that went coincide with our new comprehensive plan, which influenced the future land use plan? So I would like for Greg to sort of give you an overview of that project and then how it spoke to the future land use.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. Happy to do that. And probably the only data point that I didn't mention that certainly warrants a description and kind of understanding of the process with respect to its contributions to the future land use map. So running concurrently with this process, the comprehensive land use plan update, you'll see it titled Lift Command here. So I'm going to explain a little bit of the jargon. So if I lose anyone, we can stop and I'll answer any questions that the board may have. Lift Command is a software, is a kind of a proprietary software that we as a firm, engineering and planning firm, Withers Ravenel, have developed. And what it really does is help communities monitor their wastewater capacity. And so within the town of Anger, it's a database. Think of it as a database. You have your different lift stations. I'm going to avoid speaking very technical here because I know we've gotten technical over the last several months. You have all of your sewer infrastructure in one interface, one database. You can see exactly where you are today with respect to capacity in certain areas of town. You have different lift stations as part of your sanitary sewer system. What lift stations are nearing capacity? Where do we maybe need to pay special attention on any additional growth or any additional infrastructure upgrades needed? So that's what Lift Command is intended to help you visualize, right? As opposed to just an Excel spreadsheet or a lot of other pen and paper. Someone, right, has a piece of pen and paper and are keeping up with these things. So what you can actually do with Lift Command is plug in a development scenario in a certain area of town and visualize how much it moved the needle on capacity, sewer capacity. So what we were able to do is kind of go through an iterative process, I guess is the best way to say, best way to put it, with a little bit of learning along the way, of creating a future land use map, right? So I'm gonna start from page 1 here on how this played a role into the comprehensive plan, specifically the future land use map. So what we did was first understand, where do we have bottlenecks? Where do we have capacity constraints or concerns within the community? Okay, maybe it's not wise to have, and I'm going to skip ahead now, maybe it's not extremely wise to have our most dense future land use designations or character areas in those areas right now, right? Because we understand we have pretty significant capacity concerns here thanks to the insight we already knew, but now we can visualize via Lift Command in this program. So that helped us create kind of this first draft of the future land use map, right? Well, we quickly kind of saw, hey, yes, this is what it looks like when you completely rely on data, right? This is what a future land use map may look like when everything kind of is showing we're at capacity here. So, hey, no more dense growth. We're gonna have to go to 1 acre lots. Well, what was the first thing we kind of looked at each other and said? There's no downtown. There's no really downtown anywhere, I would argue to say, in immediately surrounding area that has 1 acre lots, big lots. Everything is going to be dense around downtown, and what's kind of the concept there? Well, in theory, if you're kind of not pushing's not the right word, concentrating growth centrally, you are kind of relying on lengthy infrastructure investments. That's no longer really necessary, right? Because you're having a more concentrated network and system, right? So you're not having to exhaust resources far out beyond corporate limits today. So that first iteration, when we relied on kind of where we understood sewer capacity constraints to exist, led us to a very unrealistic scenario of low density around downtown Proper Andrew. Not realistic. So what we were able to do then is kind of, again, in an iterative fashion, go through different drafts of the future land use map. This is kind of more realistic, right? This vision where we have more kind of mixed use around downtown, also preserving some of the downtown residences that surround the community. So, you know, we have a few existing older homes on smaller lots, but let's make sure we kind of preserve those. And then as we're expanding a little bit outward from the downtown core, you know, in the last 5 years, we have all of these, 6,000 to 10,000 square foot lots. That's not, you know, going to change. That kind of tone has been set in this band, we'll call it, this band around the town. So let me digress there, but we ended up creating this map. As you can see, all of this orange is predominantly what, you know, you're seeing in new neighborhoods today. This residential neighborhood, future land use character area, this fits the mold of about, I'd say, most of the projects that come before this board today and come to the town. So that kind of it takes into account, or it covers dense, you know, we're talking about 6,000 to 11,000 square foot lots. It also accounts for townhomes and some very limited multifamily uses. So that's that orange, right? And to tie it back to Lift Command, what we're now able to do, and it's kind of intended to, I guess, really be a living concept, right? We plugged in this draft here and can toggle it on now in Lift Command with, hey, if everything, while so very unrealistic, but if everything was developed in accordance with the future land use map, because we have different densities associated with these different designations, everything in Andrew was built today, what would our sewer system need? Well, to talk about kind of, again, going back to what we learned throughout this process, on this map, we have Andrew's growing in many different areas, right? Mainly, we're seeing some kind of parcels get annexed in the northeastern portion, but, you know, growing really all around Andrew, right? So we looked at, we kind of zoomed out. The scope has been zoomed out on what we accounted for in this document. So we actually went outside of the town's corporate limits and extraterritorial jurisdiction, ETJ, and looked 2 miles beyond the corporate limits for this study area, just to be ahead of the curve on, hey, we know we can legally, by law, annex out to these areas, so why should we not think about what land use could look like out here? Well, one of the tricky parts of that, with tying it again back to the sewer basin analysis and lift command portion, is when you plug in 2 miles worth of infrastructure into just Andrew's wastewater system, of course everything's going to light up red. Yeah.
Yeah.
Current wastewater system, right. Of course everything's going to light up red, right? It's not realistic to not expect upgrades and a system expansion or whatever the case may be. So tying it all, I'm going to close the loop here by saying the town now has a tool as part of this lift command where, okay, it helped us shape the future land use map for the community, but now we can see what's on the ground today, kind of where all of our lift stations sit with respect to their individual capacities and the overall system, how it functions capacity, without going too deep into the weeds on how a wastewater system functions here. But we can say, okay, we're getting a development proposal, or maybe we're getting interest in this area. It's going to pump its wastewater to lift station number 7. Well, we can plug in the characteristics of that development and say it's going to be 100 units. What's the impact going to be? And we can actually visualize what it'll look like now with respect to moving the needle on the capacity for that certain sewer basin or that certain lift station. So very powerful tool. And Jeff, go ahead.
So what you'll see here is that the plan is encouraging growth to the north and west of town and south of town.
Yeah.
That's where our current capacities, our current wastewater infrastructure is at its best.
Yep.
Those areas that are in yellow, that's where our sewer capacity currently is not at its best. Doesn't mean that there could not be upgrades in that area, and a development could absolutely work in that part of town. Well, what with lift command and the land use plan is telling us now is that we're going to grow north and west of town and south of town. And then, and speaking to densities, densities will be closer to utilities, will be closer to, transportation routes,
Yep.
the bypass. These are evaluation points that we will use evaluating projects and rezoning that come to you. So, I can anticipate future staff reports for development that may come to you all as a planning and development or conditional zoning request for 100 units or 150 units, that we plug in data points and we tell you all this is going to lift station number 8 and that goes to number 9, and these are the capacities that go along with that. At some point, the town's going to do a wastewater master plan, which goes beyond what this plan, what lift command has done for the town. And so those will be data points that we'll use to evaluate projects. We want projects, and we want to encourage projects where it's advantageous for the town and the developer to develop. If there are places that development wishes to be that's not advantageous for us, we need to evaluate that. We need to figure out why we're getting this request and why we may want to say yes to that. Or we may say, well, we're just not at the point as a town to say yes to this development because of all these factors. So that's why you see the map as it is. It sort of looks like, well, y'all just sort of made it up, and there's there's high density here and high density there. There was a system of methodology of where these lower density
Thank you, Jeff. Yep.
Designations would be, and part of that methodology was the lift command and where our current capacities, our current system is operating well. And so that will be a data point that always changes. So if we do upgrades at stations, lift command will then do we'll have to go in and prefigure the numbers. yearly check-ins of how we'll do updates to the whole future land use plan 5 to 7 years out. And that may be where we have learned from other studies, where we need to, where maybe some of this yellow area is now ripe for development, because we've had upgrades, we've had new water, wastewater treatment facilities, or so it's a snapshot for today. And I think from just the iterative process that Greg mentioned, this is where I believe if we polled you all and the citizens of town, this is where we're from.
Yep.
North and west of town and south of town. You all have seen that through development proposals and rezonings that have come to you. And the lift command just sort of just verified that and solidified our thinking.
Thank you, Jeff. Very well said.
Sort of the other thought I had, sort of wrapping up Greg's presentation, is that we will be, my plan is to wrap this up in November with the town board, and in the 26th season, we will start a comprehensive look at our UDO. So you saw the couple of action items there were to look at section 6.6 and 6.3, chapter 6 for this one in particular. That's what we will be working on. So, we went 4 or 5 months, 6 months, and we didn't have a meeting. We will have meetings moving forward to just talk about the UDO. And what we would like to have change, what needs to change based off of our comprehensive plan. We have a vision, we have to execute the vision. So that's the work that planning board and staff, along with the town board, will be doing over the next year plus.
Let the text amendment fun begin, right?
Correct.
And as Jeff,
I'll end that, and you all can have any questions that you have.
Before I open my mouth, anybody have comments you want to make? Questions, anything?
No, I was just sort of curious. I know you worked on this as on the board or on the steering committee as well. I don't know if you had any highlights you wanted to point out with us that may not have already been covered.
I will say the thing that I saw, and Greg did a great point of talking about this just then. The last one I remember seeing had just a laundry list of stuff. And I don't think we can go back and say we completed X and we completed Y. We didn't fix this, we didn't fix that. This to me is, if we said everything is short term, then we didn't make it hard enough. We didn't push ourselves enough. If everything is ongoing, then we're not giving anything anything to do right now. This is great because it gives us, here's some things we need to worry about in the next year. Here's 3 to 5 years out. When we get ready, time to make a major change to this or an update, we're really at that ongoing stage. It's a great tiered way to come back and look at this constantly. And it helps us say the people in Andrew asked for X, Y, and Z, and these were their primary things, and these were their secondary things. Well, let's go look at the primary. Let's go look at the 1 year, 2 year. Let's go see what we can click off. When we talk about tree planting, preserving some of these things, possibly getting developers to change from a clear cut, pull back, then reload the land back to, through conditional zoning, a little more of leaving some more trees, leaving some more pieces here, work around it. We will help you guys if we need a little adjustment on setbacks or side setbacks or rear setbacks in order to get the tree canopies here. I've been a big one lately watching the development across the street, because that's what I get to see every day, is the light pollution. They run their lights 20, as soon as it gets dark, all their street lights come on full blast. I know because I've seen them. They have dimming schedules. Right now it's the trailer. Their motion light or their night light sensor light at their door of their trailer is brighter than any of their street lights. And so I will remind them tomorrow to see if they don't mind clicking the button and turning it off, because it has a street light across the street from it. It's not a safety thing. But those are the things that when we talk about enhancing the town, when we ask for better neighborhoods, smarter neighborhoods, when we talk about, how can we take this concept that the town has asked us for and then say, on these streets coming into these neighborhoods, it will have 500 cars accessing through it. Maybe that road needs to be a little wider. Maybe we need to take street side parking away. Maybe we also need to say, you have to do a better job of getting enough cars and parking spots in your driveways to prevent it from happening. Because as Andrew grows and as we get bigger, once we add X number of homes, then the fire department has to be able to respond quicker. They have to be able to get around certain neighborhoods. But a lot of these key care abouts have a lot of small tweaks that we can go along with to make it better. But I think you did a great job of saying, let's remember, this has got to have steps to completion. And you and your staff were amazing. The two young ladies you brought for that town meeting, they were so phenomenal about engaging all the people in the town, because when you get 30 people sitting in here, if they don't get their questions asked, they get kind of fidgety.
Yeah.
They did a great job of engaging. At the same time, we go with a new town manager, new clerk, new police chief back to being a police chief. We've gone through so many changes in the last year. Y'all did a great job of being on point with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been our pleasure. I won't speak with any bias at all because I'm standing here before you all, but this goes on behalf of working with staff, the entire community, and I'll speak on behalf of my entire team. We've enjoyed every step of the way. We almost forgot to mention it, Jeff. 1 feat as part of this project that I have never had the honor of accomplishing really is we've stayed on schedule. Jeff and I, and we went before the Board of Commissioners. We established a 13-month, really 12-month schedule for this project. Didn't deviate from it. And
To Everett's point, we've had changes
Yeah.
in various areas. But this was constant, and we stayed on schedule. And it's to Greg's and his teams, all of them for keeping us moving, the steering committee, everybody involved. It dawned on Greg and I a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like, this is the schedule we told the town board we were going to do.
We can always ask to push off next month's meeting for the town commission, for the town council, and push that off into January and see how that helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty rare to have the document that we have in the time that we said we'd have it. And outside of you all not giving us a recommendation tonight, this will go to the town board in November, and from there on, hopefully they'll adopt it. But it's pretty rare for us to stay on schedule.
absolutely, definitely.
But I will say, you gave us homework from time to time, and I probably wasn't the world's best at doing homework, but I was looking and thinking. So I tell my wife, I think much better on a lawnmower than I do anywhere else, because it's the only place nobody can talk to me.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I think how we both like to look at homework assigned, it's like that's just extra icing, extra
Yeah.
flavor. We had at every steering committee meeting, you can attest, we all can. We talked for the entire hour, 2 hours. We covered so much information. I mean, I know what I presented to you all this evening, this recap of the last 12 months was a ton of info and probably hard to digest, but if it makes you feel any better, a lot of our steering committee meetings, we had a lot of info discussed, but we made a lot of ground. But glad we could mention the schedule thing as well, but please continue.
But I would say as the planning board, if you start at page 67, 68, the last few, basically the objectives and the action items, and read through them. And then as you're driving through town, where did, in our current developments, where did we hit the mark? Have we hit it already? What do we need to improve on? And become thinking of the specific things that we can then go change as a board in the future to really drive those things in, because that's what we're going to start to look at for the UDO and how we do a lot of these things. Now, some of them, it may be, a public park and things like that. We don't control that. But maybe we have a neighborhood and we coming in that we can ask for a sidewalk, a bench somewhere, part of their green space, or in conditional zoning for those areas that don't have to do something. It's we'd love if you gave us this. We can help with something else. But we can help lead to the park, or we can help connect to business area. Those are the things, but if you look at those, have those in your mind as you're cruising around town, as these are the things that we did right, we did wrong, we should do again, whatever. That's it's a great idea to just keep looking at it. Any additional questions, or does somebody want to make a motion to adopt all this work?
I just want to thank you guys for the work, town and the folks who were on. It was a lot of work over last year, and I certainly appreciate that. And I'm very pleased with what you guys have produced here. So,
Thank you very much.
I just have one question about the steering committee, about the sidewalks, the crosswalk next to the park. That will be in the, okay, yeah. But getting back to Everett's point about the street, the widening of neighborhoods, now would that be in the comprehensive plan, or is that like a DOT?
That's gonna be our street standards, that'll be in our UDO and our specifications for the town. So those things will be things that come later.
Okay.
So like my favorite, 2 lanes out, 1 lane in every street is what I'd love to see every single neighborhood do. I want that to be in the UDO. That'll be something I would say, this is what I'd love to see.
Yeah.
And I'd love to say, let's become a little more aware of connectivity. You build a neighborhood of 150 homes, but it's going to connect into a neighborhood of 250 to 300. Then it's going to connect into Crosslink and then Cotswood, all in one Roy Adams Road. Well, the first neighborhood needs to build a road that can handle all of that. And I'm sorry, they just happen to be right there at the right time. But those are the things we can do better. But at the same time, I don't think any of us were on the boards at that point. So these are things we get to tweak going forward. And then I get to go to Moorhead. Any other questions or comments?
if there are no others, I'd make a motion to approve this comprehensive plan as written here.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the Anger 2045 Planning with Purpose Comprehensive Plan. All those in favor, raise your right hand. So the motion will carry 4-0. I don't think we have any old business, except for y'all do know at the request of the developer, the most recent rezoning we had was removed from the agenda. So that was not heard last time. So it will go to the town board on the December or November 5th meeting. And so then they will vote on that piece. I've committed that I will try to be there. Good thing is the minutes from the mysterious non-microphone meeting will now be printed so people can see it, because I read the minutes again and they're not that exciting. So it's not get said a whole lot. That's the only old business that would be there. So at this point, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor, raise your hand. So carried.
Greg, thank